The government has pushed to keep schools open during the coronavirus pandemic, allowing states and territories to make the final call on their own plans. It's ignited a debate on whether students and their families are at risk of spreading coronavirus as New South Wales pushes for students to return to face-to-face teaching, while other states like Queensland and Victoria insist on online learning. The State Secretary of the Teachers Professional Association of Queensland, Jack McGuire, joins me now. Jack, what are your thoughts on the massive disparity between the messaging in some states, particularly Victoria and Queensland, compared to certainly the Prime Minister's rhetoric and certainly some of the other states?
Yeah, look, it is difficult, Gleeson. On one hand, you've got you know, politicians locking themselves away and not going into Parliament to try and protect themselves, and then on the other hand, you know, they're expecting teachers to go back to the classroom. It is a tough one. On one hand, we've got we represent private school teachers. We need to get the economy cranking in order for parents to be able to pay their dues. They need to have jobs or pay for their school fees. So they need to have jobs in order for teachers to get paid. In the private sector, in the public sector, sorry, we've seen a total critical failure from this state Labor government to be able to provide even basic PPE. We're still hearing every day from our members that bathrooms don't have soaps in them, hand sanitisers aren't at schools, let alone in every classroom. You know, the conversation we really should be having at a state school level is how can we safely get teachers back into the classroom and back in front of children, because we know that is the best way for children to learn is to have classroom teaching with teachers out the front. They're trained professionals, that's what they do best.
Jack, there's been a lot of criticism of the Queensland Teachers Union here on the basis that it is doing the government's bidding when it comes to education policy. On the one hand, you've got Jeanette Young, the Queensland Chief Medical Officer, saying it's okay to send kids back to school. And the Premier does take the CMO's advice on, well, just about everything, but certainly not on bringing kids back to school.
Well, it would appear that way, that the QTU is bullying the government into not going back to school. But I think if you look a little bit closer at the situation, you could almost have a different take. We know that the government has failed to be able to even provide basic PPE. We still don't have, you know, as I was saying, bathrooms with soap. The current situation is very convenient, where the QTU look very strong to their more militant members in saying that we've shut down schools. And it also helps the government save face, knowing that they don't need to supply PPE or as much PPE to schools because they're totally failing in that regard.
Jack, let's talk about kids and their ability or otherwise to spread this particular virus. Do you think teachers have a legitimate concern that that there is that risk, despite the fact that in most instances chief medical officers are saying no, the risk is very, very low?
Look, I do think they have a valid concern. I think we still don't know enough about this virus, particularly in this country. Peter Van Onselen wrote an interesting article today, I think, which hit the nail on the head, saying that the evidence or the science in Australia that the chief medical officers are relying on are basically saying that there weren't virus outbreaks happening in a big way at schools. And now that's true, but I mean, we haven't had many viral outbreaks in this country at all. We're quite fortunate, but the few that have happened in schools occurred right before the lockdown and just before all the children were sent home. So we still don't really know. We do know from previous experience that viruses do become transmitted quite easily and readily in schools. So as I said, the conversation that we need to be having now is that we need to be, how can we get teachers back into the classroom safely? And does it look like teachers and children wearing PPE? Do they wear masks? Perhaps that's what's happening in other countries. Perhaps it's the discussion that we should be having now, albeit it's a much more difficult conversation to be having now, given the state doesn't have any PPE. I mean, we tried to warn them a couple of months ago, but only a few days ago they've acknowledged receipt of our concerns. So.
Which is extraordinary considering that, you know, we really have flattened the curve, particularly in Queensland. I mean, you would hate to have thought of what might have happened if we hadn't have been so successful in containing this particular virus. Jack McGuire, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time.
Legend. Thanks, Gleeson.